Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment purposes. What happens when a seasoned journalist refuses to back down from a co-host who thinks she runs the show? Today we're diving into the explosive confrontation that ended with Tamron Hall being escorted off the View set, and trust me, you won't believe how this all started. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment telling me which View co-host you think causes the most drama, because this story is going to blow your mind. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday morning taping of The View. The Hot Topics segment was running as usual, with the panel discussing the latest celebrity scandal when Joy Behar decided to pivot the conversation in a completely different direction. What started as casual banter quickly escalated into something much more serious. "You know what really bothers me?" Joy said, interrupting Tamron mid-sentence as she was making a point about media responsibility, "is when people who haven't been in this business as long as I have try to lecture the rest of us about journalism ethics." The studio fell silent. Even the audience seemed to sense the tension that had just entered the room. Tamron's expression shifted from confused to defensive as she processed what had just been said. "Excuse me, Joy, but I'm not sure what you're implying here," Tamron responded, her voice steady but with an edge that anyone who knew her could recognize as a warning sign. "Are you suggesting that my 15 years in broadcast journalism somehow don't qualify me to have an opinion on media ethics?" Joy leaned back in her chair with that smirk she was known for, the one that usually preceded her most controversial statements. "I'm just saying that some of us have been doing this since before you even knew what a teleprompter was, sweetie. Maybe you should listen more and talk less." The condescending tone of that last word, sweetie, hung in the air like a challenge. Whoopi Goldberg, sitting at the head of the table, tried to jump in with a quick subject change, but Tamron wasn't having it. "Did you just call me sweetie in a professional setting while questioning my credentials?" Tamron asked, her journalist instincts kicking in as she leaned forward slightly. "Because if that's what just happened, we need to address this right now." Joy rolled her eyes dramatically, playing to the audience like she always did when she felt cornered. "Oh, please, don't be so sensitive. I call everyone sweetie. It's not that serious." "But you don't call everyone's professional experience into question on live television." Tamron shot back, "And you certainly don't do it while they're trying to make a valid point about an important issue." The other co-hosts were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the usual playful disagreement that viewers were accustomed to seeing on The View. This felt personal, and it was happening in real time. Joy's demeanor changed completely. The fake sweetness disappeared, replaced by something much colder. "Listen, Tamron, I've been carrying this show for years, while hosts come and go. You're not special, and you're certainly not irreplaceable. Maybe you should remember that before you try to go toe-to-toe with someone who actually built this platform." The audience gasped audibly. Even for The View, known for its heated debates, this level of personal attack was unprecedented. Tamron's face flushed, but her voice remained controlled, though everyone could hear the anger beneath the surface. "Built this platform?" Tamron repeated slowly. "Joy, with all due respect, you're one co-host on a show that was created by Barbara Walters. You didn't build anything. You're just another voice at this table, same as the rest of us." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Joy's face turned red, and she slammed her hand down on the table hard enough to make the coffee mugs jump. "How dare you diminish my contributions to this show?" Joy shouted, her voice rising to a level that made the studio audience murmur nervously. "I have been the heart and soul of The View for longer than you've been relevant in television." Tamron stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor in the sudden silence. "And there it is," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "The real Joy Behar. Not the quirky comedian everyone thinks they know, but someone who can't handle being challenged by a colleague without having a complete meltdown." The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of this unprecedented breakdown in professional decorum. Joy also stood up, her face contorted with rage. "You want to see a meltdown?" Joy screamed. "You come onto my show, you disrespect me in front of my audience, and then you have the audacity to psychoanalyze me? Who do you think you are?" "Your show?" Tamron laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Joy, this is not your show. This is The View, and last I checked, we're all co-hosts here. The fact that you think you own this table says everything anyone needs to know about why this show has such a toxic work environment." Those words, toxic work environment, seemed to flip a switch in Joy. She started moving around the table toward Tamron, her finger pointing accusingly. "Toxic? You want to talk about toxic? You've been here 5 minutes, and you think you can come in here and change everything, question everything, judge everything. This show was fine before you got here. Tamron didn't back down as Joy approached. Instead, she stood her ground, meeting Joy's glare with one of her own. Fine for who, Joy? Fine for you because no one was willing to call you out on your behavior? Because everyone was too scared to tell you when you were out of line? The studio was in complete chaos now. Producers were frantically trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial. The other co-hosts were attempting to de-escalate the situation. And the audience was watching in stunned silence as two professional women had what could only be described as a complete breakdown of workplace civility. Joy was now standing directly in front of Tamron, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that the microphones barely picked up. You have no idea what you're messing with here. I can make your life very difficult. Tamron's eyebrows shot up. Did you just threaten me on live television? Because if you did, I want to make sure everyone heard that clearly. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was about to consume everything in its path. Tamron's question about whether Joy had just threatened her on live television seemed to snap everyone in the studio back to the reality of what was happening. This wasn't just a heated debate anymore. This was a full-scale professional meltdown being broadcast to millions of viewers. Joy's face went pale as she realized what she had just said and how it sounded. But instead of backing down or apologizing, she doubled down in the worst possible way. That wasn't a threat, Joy said, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. That was a promise. You clearly don't understand how things work around here. Whoopi finally found her voice and tried to intervene. Okay, ladies, let's take a step back here. We're all professionals. We can work this out. But Tamron wasn't interested in Whoopi's attempt at peacekeeping. She was a journalist who had just been threatened by a colleague on national television, and every instinct she had was telling her to pursue this story to its conclusion. No, Whoopi, we're not going to just sweep this under the rug, Tamron said, never taking her eyes off Joy. Joy just admitted on live television that she can make my life difficult if I don't fall in line with whatever she wants. That's not how professional workplaces operate, and it's certainly not how this show should operate. Joy laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. Professional workplace? This is television, honey. This is about ratings, personalities, and entertainment. If you can't handle the heat, maybe you should go back to whatever little local station you crawled out of. The insult to Tamron's career was so blatant and cruel that even some of the audience members booed. Tamron had worked at major networks, won awards, and built a respected career in journalism. To reduce her accomplishments to a local station was not just inaccurate, it was deliberately humiliating. Local station? Tamron repeated, her voice getting dangerously quiet. Joy, are you really going to sit there and lie about my resume on live television? Because unlike some people at this table, I didn't get my job through connections or by being controversial. I earned every position I've ever held. The implication was clear, and Joy caught it immediately. Her face turned red again, and she stepped even closer to Tamron. Are you suggesting that I didn't earn my place here? Joy demanded. Because I have news for you. Little Miss Perfect, I've been entertaining audiences since before you were born. I've paid my dues in ways you can't even imagine. Tamron shook her head slowly, a sad smile crossing her face. Entertaining audiences and being a journalist are two very different things, Joy. And right now, you're proving exactly why this show has struggled with credibility issues. That was apparently the final straw. Joy completely lost whatever composure she had left and started shouting at the top of her lungs. Credibility issues? This show has been successful for decades. We've interviewed presidents, covered major news stories, influenced political conversations. What have you done that's so important? Tamron's response was calm, measured, and devastating. I've never threatened a colleague on live television. I've never belittled someone's professional accomplishments because I disagreed with them. And I've never had a public meltdown because someone challenged my opinion. That's what I've done, Joy. The studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras humming. Even the production crew seemed frozen, unsure whether they should be documenting this career-ending moment or trying to stop it. Joy was breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to regain control. But when she spoke again, her words were even more shocking than anything that had come before. You know what your problem is, Tamron? You think you're better than everyone else. You think you're smarter, more professional, more ethical. But the truth is, you're just another pretty face who got lucky. Without that smile and those good looks, you'd be nobody. The gasps from the audience were audible this time. Even for someone known for controversial statements, Joy had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She had reduced the accomplished journalist to nothing more than her appearance, and she had done it in front of millions of viewers. Tamron's expression didn't change, but everyone in the studio could see the fire building behind her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was so controlled it was almost frightening. "And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen," Tamron said, turning slightly toward the cameras. "This is what workplace harassment looks like. This is what happens when someone in a position of power decides that they can say whatever they want to whoever they want without consequences." Joy realized she had gone too far, but instead of apologizing, she became defensive. "Oh, please, don't turn this into some feminist manifesto. You're being overly dramatic." "Dramatic?" Tamron laughed, but there was steel in her voice. "Joy, you just told me that my entire career is based on my looks rather than my abilities. You threatened me professionally. You questioned my qualifications. You called me names. And now you're telling me I'm being dramatic for calling it what it is?" The other co-hosts were desperately trying to signal to the producers to cut to commercial, but the train wreck was so compelling that nobody seemed able to look away. Joy was spiraling now, making the situation worse with every word. "Maybe if you weren't so sensitive about every little thing, we could actually have a normal conversation around here." Tamron shook her head in disbelief. "A normal conversation? Joy, you started this by questioning my credentials out of nowhere. You escalated it by making personal attacks. You threatened me professionally, and now you're trying to gaslight me into thinking this is my fault? This is textbook workplace bullying." The word bullying seemed to hit Joy like a physical blow. She staggered backward slightly, her face cycling through anger, shock, and something that might have been fear as she realized that this conversation was being recorded and would likely be replayed endlessly. "I am not a bully," Joy said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm just honest. Maybe that's something you're not used to." Tamron looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Joy, if this is your idea of honesty, then you need to take a long, hard look at yourself. Because what you've done here today isn't honest. It's cruel, and it's going to follow you for the rest of your career." The tension in the studio was so thick, it was suffocating. Producers were frantically trying to decide whether to cut the cameras. Security was being quietly alerted, and the other co-hosts were sitting in stunned silence as they watched two careers potentially end in real time. Joy's denial about being a bully fell flat in the suffocating silence of the studio. Everyone could see that she was losing control of the narrative, and in her desperation, she made the decision that would ultimately end this confrontation in the most dramatic way possible. "You know what?" Joy said, her voice rising again as she pointed an accusatory finger at Tamron. "If you don't like how things work around here, maybe you should leave. Maybe this show isn't the right fit for someone with your delicate sensibilities." Tamron raised an eyebrow, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Are you trying to fire me, Joy? Because last I checked, you don't have that authority." Joy's face flushed again, realizing she had just overstepped her bounds in yet another way. "I'm not trying to fire you. I'm suggesting that maybe you'd be happier somewhere else." "Somewhere else?" Tamron repeated slowly. "You mean somewhere where I won't challenge your behavior? Somewhere where I'll just sit quietly and let you say whatever you want without consequences?" Before Joy could respond, Tamron continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Because that's really what this is about, isn't it? You're not upset about anything I said during the hot topics discussion. You're upset because I refuse to be intimidated by you." Joy was clearly struggling to find a response that wouldn't make her look worse, but she was too far gone to stop now. "I'm upset because you think you can come in here and change everything about a show that was working perfectly fine." "Working perfectly fine for you," Tamron corrected. "But what about everyone else who has to work with your attitude every day? What about the producers who have to tiptoe around your moods? What about the guests who have to endure your interruptions and personal attacks?" The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of what was quickly becoming television history. Joy looked around the studio as if she was just now realizing that this entire meltdown was being broadcast live. "Turn off the cameras," Joy suddenly demanded, looking directly at the production crew. "Turn them off right now." But the producers weren't taking orders from Joy, and the cameras kept rolling. Tamron seized on Joy's moment of panic. "No, Joy, let them keep rolling." Tamron said firmly. Let everyone see exactly who you really are when you don't get your way. Let them see what happens when someone stands up to you. Joy was visibly shaking now, caught between rage and panic. You can't use this against me. This is my show. There it is again, Tamron said, her voice cutting through Joy's desperation. Your show, your rules, your way or the highway. Do you hear yourself? Do you understand how delusional that sounds? Whoopi made one last attempt to salvage the situation. Ladies, please, we need to take a commercial break and work this out backstage. But Joy was beyond reason now. She turned on Whoopi with the same venom she had been directing at Tamron. Don't tell me what we need to do. I don't need you protecting her. Whoopi's eyes widened in shock. Even she, despite all her years in entertainment and her experience dealing with difficult personalities, seemed stunned by Joy's complete breakdown. Tamron watched this exchange with a mixture of fascination and horror. Joy, do you realize you just snapped at Whoopi for trying to help you? Do you see what you're doing to everyone around you? Joy whirled back toward Tamron, her face contorted with rage. Stop psychoanalyzing me. You're not my therapist. You're right, Tamron said calmly. I'm not your therapist. I'm your colleague. And as your colleague, I'm telling you that your behavior is completely unacceptable. The studio audience was completely silent now, transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before them. Some were recording on their phones, ensuring that this moment would live forever on social media. Joy seemed to realize that she had lost all control of the situation. In a last desperate attempt to regain some semblance of authority, she made the demand that would seal her fate. Security, Joy screamed toward the back of the studio. I want her removed from the set immediately. The security guards who had been quietly positioned near the exits looked confused. They glanced at the producers, unsure of whose orders to follow in this unprecedented situation. Tamron looked at Joy with something that might have been pity. You're calling security on me? For what exactly? For disagreeing with you? For standing up to your bullying? For refusing to be intimidated? Joy was breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to justify her actions. For disrupting the show, for creating a hostile work environment. The irony was so thick it was almost tangible. Tamron let out a short laugh that held no humor whatsoever. I'm creating a hostile work environment? Tamron asked incredulously. Joy, you have threatened me, insulted my appearance, questioned my qualifications, tried to diminish my career accomplishments, and now you're calling security to have me removed because I won't back down, and you think I'm the one creating hostility? The producers finally stepped in, approaching the set with hesitant steps. One of them, a woman in her 40s who looked like she had aged 10 years in the past 20 minutes, approached Joy carefully. Miss Behar, I think we need to cut to commercial and discuss this situation backstage, the producer said diplomatically. But Joy was too far gone to accept any reasonable solution. No, I want her gone. I want her off this set right now. Tamron stood up straighter, her dignity intact despite everything that had just happened. You know what, Joy? You're going to get your wish, but not because you have the power to make me leave. She turned toward the cameras one final time, speaking directly to the audience with the poise and professionalism that had made her career. I'm leaving because I refuse to work in an environment where bullying and intimidation are tolerated. I refuse to be part of a show where one person thinks they can treat their colleagues however they want without consequences. As Tamron began to remove her microphone, Joy made one final desperate attempt to have the last word. Good, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Tamron paused, microphone halfway off, and looked at Joy with something that might have been sadness. You know what the really tragic part of all this is, Joy? You had a chance to be a mentor, a leader, someone who lifted up other women in this industry. Instead, you chose to be exactly the kind of person that makes this business so difficult for everyone else. With that, Tamron finished removing her microphone, placed it carefully on the table, and walked off the set with her head held high. The cameras followed her until she disappeared through the exit, leaving behind a studio full of stunned faces and one very pale Joy Behar who was just beginning to realize what she had done. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of Joy's labored breathing and the distant murmur of the audience trying to process what they had just witnessed. And that's how Tamron Hall left the view, not in defeat, but with a dignity that made Joy Behar's behavior look even worse by comparison.